Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I bring you greetings from the New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church in Jackson, Mississippi, where for the last 7 years I have been privileged to serve as their shepherd here. And so I'm very grateful to be here. I'm honored because I got a call back.
That's right.
I was able to share this occasion last year as the speaker. Matter of fact, that was a callback because I served as the MLK speaker in that January.
Right.
And so I don't know how often that happens. Most times I only get to preach back to back consecutively at the church that I pastor. So I'm honored to Mr. Kraft and all the officers of Smith County NAACP for having me back here again this year. And I'm very grateful to see all of you who thought it not robbery to come out and share in his organization and in their mission and in their praxis of empowering and liberating our people of color across this country and in the world. So I'm rambling because I am nervous. You would think that I speak across this country that I would not be nervous, but I am every time I speak. And so I want to thank my friend Trerica for a wonderful introduction. She was nervous and she was making me nervous.
And I was nervous.
Imagine this is nervous, and that piles on it. Yeah, it is the weather, so I thank all of you all for coming out here this evening. To be a good preacher, I must say, I don't intend to hold you long, but we're going to speak as we shall. Speaking from the theme, keep moving forward, steadfast and unmovable. And I think this is an appropriate theme in the time that we are living in. 50 years ago, our country experienced one of the most challenging years of its entire history. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. Robert Kennedy was assassinated. You had riots in Chicago, Baltimore, and D.C. You had George Wallace, segregationist governor, running for president. And thank goodness he didn't win. But you had Richard Nixon, who won the presidency. And we all know what happened there. But in 1968, you also had something monumental happen. You had two black brothers who, in the summer of 1968 at the Olympics in Mexico City, stand proudly on the podium representing their country, the United States. But they did something to change the world. They bowed their heads and raised their fists with black gloves on, determining themselves to represent the plight of their country. That changed the dynamic of them from being just athletes to activists. 1968, you had Aretha Franklin singing Chain Fool, and you better think about what you're trying to do to me. You had the Temptations singing They Wish It Would Rain. You had the Impressions, who were a bit more distinguished, and they released a song that said, "This is my country." You had James Brown proclaiming something that had never been heard. Say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. And then you had my favorite of all time, Miles Davis, who released a seminal album that year, Miles in the Sky. 1968 was a pivotal year in our country. Because while we saw all those things happening, we saw and what came to light was an unrest that had never been seen before. There were pockets of it that America got to see. But for some reason, there was a major apocalypse. There was an uncovering that occurred that year that raised the awareness of people that we've got to do something to change this country. In many ways today, our country is experiencing the same thing. And I like to call what we're experiencing regressive nostalgia. Regressive nostalgia is the idea that we need to go backwards. We need to go back to those days. And it sounds like this. They always start, I remember when. That's the key phrase. I remember when we could walk out of our house and go to our neighbor's house. I remember when everybody could spank anybody. I remember when we could pray in schools and no people got offended. I remember when. And while that phrase is very nostalgic, it also brings about a sense of regression. And when we say, I remember when, we try to go back there. And we're seeing that happen in our country. If you just pay attention, you see that regressive nostalgia occurring in our country. What you'll see is, for example, in entertainment, we're going back. You saw the bringing back of television sitcoms that people love, like Roseanne. And now they realize why she shouldn't have been on the air. You see the nostalgia of going back even now with hairstyles. I look at the kids today and they're wearing the high top fades that I wore in high school. Now by the time I got to college, that was out. And now these kids, I saw one with the same gummy dewdrop that I had, like Bobby Brown back in the day. I know y'all don't know that, though. I know some of that's over your head, but Bobby Brown used to have, back in the day, before Bobby met me. In many ways, our country is experiencing this regressive nostalgia. And by that, I mean there are many Americans who are choosing to yearn for the former days of their firm, positive history of what they believe this country used to be good at. Think about that for a moment. Their firm, positive history. What someone said to them that they believed to be true that was not true at all. And it takes a more prevalent form today in one little phrase. Make America great again. When you hear that phrase, everybody's like, yes, we are not as great as we used to be. And I'm thinking, are you serious? When have we never been great? Post-World War II, we led the world in everything. When have we not been great? Right now, we have our military stationed all around the world. We have them in Niger, of all places, a place in Africa. And then when people get killed over there, they say, no, it's somebody else's fault. It's nostalgia because, dare I say this, 10 years ago, we had the boldness to elect a person of color as president of the United States. And many people were enthusiastic about the hope that he brought, or that he perceived would bring to this country. And what we saw after his election proved trivial at best, because it brought out that intense regressive nostalgia. And it was not in a positive way, it was in a negative way, because all of a sudden, everybody now said, including myself, was like, wait a minute, is we going forward or backwards? I was saying that because there was a fear of what could be. We had a lot of people who were saying, we need to stay this way as America. We don't need what they are going to try to push. You had conservatives who saying, well, we don't need same-sex marriage. We don't need this. We don't need that. You had liberals saying, we need this. We need that. You had people who were just indistinctive and undecided, indecisive about where they stood politically, where they stood on some social issues. And because of that, we began to rip apart at the seams. All because of nostalgia. So, we're seeing this come full circle now. Because we have folk who have been emboldened by their nostalgia, that regressive nostalgia. They have been emboldened. That's why they were able to walk down the streets of Charlottesville, Virginia, and say chants like, the Jews will not replace us. That's why they were emboldened to have a president of the United States saying, well, there were bad people on both sides, instead of standing up for the injustice pitted against one side. That's why they're emboldened enough to say, we don't want immigrants, we don't want people for asylum, just because they may be people of color who look and act and be different from us. And believe it or not, a lot of people bought into that nostalgia, thinking that America has always been one way, a white way. It's a scary thing when you ponder the systemic nostalgia that's infected our country. And it has progressed because it's allowing people like President Trump, Sean Hannity, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levine, and many other names that you don't know but I love to listen to. It's emboldening them to ramp up their rhetoric to say that this is what America used to be, and everybody else who doesn't agree to that or doesn't see it like that is damned. Reminds me of Nina Simone's song when she wrote about the great state of Mississippi, and she said, Mississippi, goddamn. But when we talk about nostalgia, we can talk about the alt-right perspective to be more public in their expressions of bigotry, hate, and discrimination. But we also must talk about the collective black community who, in the same sense of regressive nostalgia, have been less empowered and less demanding of our political and social change that we desire and that we work to achieve in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. It's this latter that I want to address. See, because for us, people of color, black people, African Americans, whatever you want to identify as nowadays, you got white folk who identify as black for whatever reason. The last 50 years for us, we as a race and a culture have seen a complacency and a complicity that has almost irreparably damaged our communities. Matter of fact, you can cross any railroad track in just about any city or any town, and you can know where you are. You can ride down the street of any street that's named Martin Luther King, and you know where you are. You ain't got to say amen. You can ride and you can distinguish our communities by seeing the depth of depravity that exists there. And it's sad because we see the abundance of churches and houses of worship in our community, but we also see the abundance of liquor stores, barber and beauty shops, fast food restaurants, and we see food deserts where Family Dollar or the local gas station served as the grocery store, providing poor nutrition for our children. We can see the more ardent bigotry and racism that the mainstream news is promoting, although inadvertently doing so. They realize that by making it a headline, they're going to make some profit. at our expense. We see it every morning when our leader of the free world tweets whatever he wants to tweet, and it becomes policy. You may be bored one morning and say, hey, I'm going to meet with whoever, just because. Maybe bored one morning and say, well, you know what, I decided just because I want to, we're going to stop doing this. We're going to stop trading this way. Or you may have a beef with Canada, of all people. If you've ever been to Canada, you know they are the nicest people. And he's putting a beef with them. I mean, you know, I grew up in the era of hip-hop beef. You know, there was West Coast beef, East Coast beef. And I'm thinking, why in the world would we have a president of the United States that's beefing with everybody for no reason? I mean, he doesn't even have a good hairstyle to beef about. We see this, and we have a sense of complicity in it, and that we feel unable to engage it like we used to. That's the regressiveness. Because I grew up hearing the stories of people meeting and marching. Now I'm part of the meeting and the marching, but there's nothing else happening afterwards. I've been to plenty of rallies. I've been to plenty of events. I go to the U.S. Capitol and lobby and advocate, and I still see little to no change. Largely because we're not demanding it. It amazes me that we have a Congress, although largely Republican majority, we have Congress that seems to be impotent because they're afraid that the person who currently serves as our commander-in-chief might tweet about them and cause them to lose an election. So they have to find a way to connect and identify with his message and his rhetoric so they can stay in office and stay in power. That's cowardly. And yet, in our black community, we find the exact opposite. We find people who have the ability to speak up and can be vocal, but their voices are minimized and the actions are minimized because they don't feel empowered. Not because they don't have enough money or political clout. It's just they feel if I say this, I'm stepping out of line with the ones who are putting me in office. So what is this regressive nostalgia? How does this affect us? Well, it affects us in a number of ways. For us, while the talking point right now is border security, immigrant children being separated from their families, we don't have to see that at the border. We can see that in our hood. We have families being separated because the parents are neglecting and abusing them. Their parents are trying to hustle. They're trying to hustle their way out of a hustle. They're trying to hustle their way out of a hustle into another hustle that gets them bound up either in prison or in so much economic debt that they don't do anything, they can't do anything to get out of it, and the children are caught in the crossfire, and before they know it, CPS is knocking on their door, separating those children from their parents, and nobody's saying anything. The foster care system in Mississippi is a very clear picture of that, this deep dissonance. While people are rallying and crying at the border for those children who have been taken away from their parents, nobody is going to the state capitol and saying our children are in a system that is defective and ineffective and we need to change them. I'll be a foster parent. I'll be an educator who will, with these women who are, some of them are content just getting a high school diploma and nothing else. And we will say to them, all right, baby, you just do what you can. While they're living in apartments where they're guaranteed free housing if they do nothing. And the moment they try to break out of that cycle, they say, well, if you try to go forward, if you try to do this, you're going to lose your benefits. And as pastors, we are complicit in it because we don't do anything to empower them and educate them. We just let them stay. And the cycle continues. We see this in the argument about guns. I work for Everytown for Gun Safety. I'm a part of their survivor network. I'm a survivor fellow with them. I've been impacted by gun violence with the death of my mother in 1980. She was killed in an act of domestic violence that involved a gun. And in 2016, the death of my 18-year-old nephew who was killed in an act of violence that involved a gun. And so I travel across the country advocating against gun violence. And we call for common sense gun laws. But we know those laws only impact law-abiding citizens. But when in the hood that I live in, I hear gunshots all the time, and I know those folk didn't go and buy those guns from an authorized dealer. I know they didn't take their time to go through a background check. I know that they didn't take their time to go to a gun range and learn how to properly handle a weapon. Because just a couple of years ago, a 16-year-old across the street from my church, in the park, across the street from my church, had a weapon and did not know what he was doing, accidentally shot himself. And those same persons who are calling for this type of legislation are neglecting these children who are getting access to weapons and killing their brother or their sister just because somebody looked at them the wrong way. They have anger management issues that are not being addressed. They have a dissociative issue. They have so many issues that they don't go to counseling, and if they do go to counseling, they don't talk. And if they do talk, they get framed. They get the sense of not just vulnerability, but weakness for exposing themselves. And so they look hard, they got to act hard, and they go take it out on someone else. And it may end up in the person losing their life. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, every step toward the goal of justice requires sacrifice, suffering, and struggle. The tireless exertion and passionate concerns of dedicated people. If you look at the stanzas of what we now call the Negro spiritual, the Negro anthem, national anthem, those last two verses are very empowering to me. The second stanza, the first line, we stony the road we trod. Now, if we're going to talk about moving forward, we have to understand that the road constructed for us was not a steady and straight road. It was intentionally constructed for us never to get anywhere. It was intentionally instructed for us to learn to stay in our place. And if you pay close attention, every time, particularly a black man steps out of his place, they put him back in there. They find a way to put him back in his place. Most recently, and I don't want to condone actions of anyone, especially if they're criminal, but in the case of Dr. Bill Cosby, we found an outspoken advocate for black persons, black community. And though it was on the conservative side, more on the social conservative side, the minute he began to speak out, he was no longer the lovable Bill Cosby, Dr. Huxtable. He was now a target. Because he was telling black folk that they didn't have to stay in the condition that they were if they changed. And then he didn't just say it, he put his money where his mouth was. And that was threatening. We see it now with Chance the Rapper. We see it now with many other persons who are saying, okay, I got the means to change my community, and if I got the means to do it, I'm going to do it. LeBron James is becoming a great example of that. Even though he's lost the last few times, he hasn't let his losses take away from his praxis of justice for his community. He understands that his platform is more valuable off the court than on the court. Because on the court, he's only an asset for a limited amount of time. But off the court, he can be an asset for a long time. That even after he dies, if he does and he lays the foundation, his legacy will continue after him. See, it is necessary for us to understand that moving forward, it's not just about codifying the sacrifices of our ancestors. We know what our ancestors endured to get where we are today. We are seemingly fighting against an accelerated sense of progress, so we are trying to decelerate that progress. At least one portion of our people are. Some of us are fighting to push movements that for a long time were taboo in our community. And now we're realizing, okay, we've got to do something for everyone and not just ourselves. So the question is, how do we move forward when we are faced with the challenge of preserving our cultural, in particular, our racial identity? And you gotta be honest, today's America is faced with the same challenge of identity dissonance. What was once just a sense of regressive nostalgia is now a challenge to re-identify who we are. As a country, we're trying to identify who we are. Are we a country that will take in everybody, as the Statue of Liberty says, give me your tired, your poor, and those who cross the border illegally but want to have a chance to come and be right? Or are we the country that says, no, we want to be great again, white again, fearful again? As a people, who are we? What are we? Here are two things I believe we must do to be able to move forward while being steadfast in the movement. First, we must convert from reactivity to proactivity. See, nostalgia is an interesting phenomenon, because what nostalgia does, it gets you caught up in the memory instead of acting on the present. It gets you caught up on what used to be. You feel good about it because you used to be able to do it, whatever it was. But now there's an inaction that has caused nothing more than reactivity to the nostalgia. In 2014, I wrote an article dealing with nostalgia regarding the Black Lives Movement. And I admired the young people who were raising up their voice against the seemingly onslaught of police brutality against unarmed people of color. We saw marches across the country after Trayvon, after Mike Brown, the name. You can go to the pantheon of names that we have, even as young as Tamir Rice. We can go through the pantheon of names, and we can go through the moments that every time that happened, what happened? We saw reaction. We saw people excited about saying something's wrong. But it led to little proaction. We marched, young people marched, but they didn't vote. Young people got excited, but some rioted, damaging their own property in their own communities and getting stuff just because they could get it. They reacted.
They were not proactive, and our elders were unsure and uncertain how to confront, because they loved the fact that they were doing it. They loved the fact that they were marching. They loved the fact that they had a unified voice crying out against this contemptible practice. And they loved the fact that they were saying Black Lives Matter. Because them, it was nostalgia of the 50s, of the hanging bridge down in South Mississippi. It was nostalgia. It was regressive nostalgia, thinking about Emmett Till, thinking about the countless names of those who were beaten, those who were bitten by dogs, those who were splashed with water hoses. It was a remembrance of this. It was a nostalgia of remembrance of what they endured. But it was left with inactivity. We have to move from reactivity to proactivity. Now, this is where the church is a pastor. This is where it gets personal for me. We must serve this present age, our calling to fulfill. Now, if you're in a good Baptist church, you know that hymn. You know that hymn. And if you know that hymn should be not just a song, but it should be a call to action. My church, every week, we say our mission and vision statement. And our mission statement coincides with the overall mission of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. But we say the mission of New Bethel African Methodist Episcopal Church is to minister to the social, spiritual, economical, and physical development of all people, period. Because now it becomes a call of action, which means after I give the benediction, your responsibility is now to go and act. And I take leadership in that because I walk the street. I live in the neighborhood where I pastor. And the people know what Reverend Neal is. Because every now and then, I'll get a knock on the door from somebody in the community and say, Pastor, I need you to take me somewhere. Pastor, you got a few dollars? I ain't got this. Pastor, can I just mow your yard for you? Pastor, can you just pray with me? Every now and then, and we do this during the summer in my church. There's a swimming pool across the street, in the park across the street from my church. And by me, I'm just grading. I tell the kids, look, anytime you see my car there, knock on the door, you'll get some water and a snack when you come from the swimming pool. I don't expect them to come to church. I just want to be able to minister to them, to let them know that at least one person that is not directly related to cares enough about you to see that your physical need is met to some degree. Second thing is we must be authentic and relational. The biggest challenge for us as a people is to be authentic with ourselves. In communities of color, we have learned the fine art of silence. Some bad habit